If you've watched my first two videos, then you already know a little bit about my story. You've heard about some of the chapters that shaped me, the heartbreak, the rebuilding, the lessons that only became clear years later. And one of the biggest lessons I shared was this: I don't regret any of it. Not because every experience was pleasant, not because every decision was perfect, and certainly not because I would choose every hardship again. I don't regret it because every version of me made the best decision she could with the awareness she had at the time. The woman I was then did not have the knowledge I have now. She did not have the perspective I have now. She did not have the lessons I have now. She only knew what life had taught her up until that moment. And once I truly understood that, something changed. But there is another reason I don't regret it, a reason that took me years to understand. I started noticing something. Every time I revisited an old regret, I wasn't just remembering the past. I was carrying the past into the future. Think about that for a moment. How many people are physically living in the present, but emotionally living somewhere else? Still replaying conversations, still replaying mistakes, still replaying betrayals, still replaying opportunities they didn't take, still replaying versions of themselves that no longer exist. And then they wonder why it feels difficult to move forward. It's because part of them never left. Part of them is still standing in an old chapter trying to rewrite a page that's already been printed. And that's impossible. The past can teach you, but it cannot be relived. The lessons remain, the wisdom remains, the growth remains, but the chapter itself is over. And yet so many people spend years emotionally living there. Maybe you've done it too. I know I have. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to imagine a different version of your life? The relationship that could have worked, the opportunity you should have taken, the decision you wish you could change, the version of yourself you think you should have been. We build these alternate timelines in our minds, and after a while, we begin comparing our real lives to imaginary ones. The problem is that imagination has no consequences. That alternate life in your head never includes the challenges that path would have brought. It never includes the heartbreak, the setbacks, the sacrifices, the lessons. It only includes the fantasy, and reality can never compete with a fantasy. That realization changed how I looked at regret, because I began to see regret for what it really is. Regret isn't just sadness about the past. Regret is often resistance to reality. It's arguing with a chapter that has already been written. It's insisting that life should have unfolded differently. And the strange thing is that while you're arguing with yesterday, life is trying to hand you today, but your hands are already full. One of the most fascinating ideas I ever encountered came from Neville Goddard. Whether you agree with all of his teachings or not, one concept stayed with me. He often spoke about the power of assumptions, the idea that we don't simply experience life through circumstances. We experience life through the meaning we consistently assign to those circumstances. Think about how powerful that is. If someone spends years telling themselves, "I always choose the wrong people," eventually they begin approaching relationships through that lens. If someone spends years telling themselves, "Nothing ever works out for me," they begin expecting disappointment before anything has even happened. If someone spends years telling themselves, "I ruined my life," they stop noticing opportunities that still exist. The story becomes the filter, and eventually the filter starts shaping the future. Not because of magic, not because the universe is punishing them, because attention changes behavior, expectation changes behavior, identity changes behavior. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. We naturally notice evidence that supports what we already believe, and suddenly something becomes clear. The danger of regret isn't just that it hurts. The danger of regret is that it quietly becomes part of your identity. A mistake becomes a label. A heartbreak becomes a self-concept. A disappointment becomes a worldview. And once that happens, people stop expecting good things. Not consciously, quietly, underneath the surface. They become hyper-focused on protecting themselves from repeating the past. And here's the irony. The more obsessed we become with avoiding old pain, the more we carry the energy of that pain into new situations. A person who has convinced themselves they are unlovable enters relationships differently. A person who has convinced themselves life is unfair approaches opportunities differently. A person who believes they are destined to fail makes decisions differently, not because they want to, because what we believe about ourselves affects how we move through the world. And this is where I think so many people misunderstand the idea of frequency. When people hear words like frequency, vibration, or energy, they often imagine something mystical. But let's simplify it. Walk into a room believing you are not enough. Walk into a room believing everyone will eventually leave. Walk into a room expecting rejection. You will carry yourself differently. You will speak differently. You will interpret situations differently. Now walk into that same room believing that your worth comes from God, believing that what is meant for you cannot miss you, believing that you are valuable regardless of the outcome. You carry yourself differently. You notice different things. You make different decisions. The circumstances may be identical, but the experience becomes completely different. And perhaps that is what people are really talking about when they talk about frequency. The state you repeatedly live in influences the life you create, not because you're controlling every event, but because you're influencing how you respond to those events. One of the most beautiful things Islam taught me is that trust and regret cannot comfortably live in the same place. Because true trust means believing that Allah's wisdom extends beyond your own understanding. It means accepting that there were lessons you couldn't yet see, protection you couldn't yet recognize, doors that needed to close, people who needed to leave, experiences that needed to happen, not because they were enjoyable, but because they were shaping you. Think about the stories throughout the Quran. Again and again, we see people facing circumstances that make no sense in the moment. Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him, was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a well, separated from his family, sold into slavery, imprisoned despite his innocence. Imagine if he had spent his entire life replaying those events. Imagine if he had allowed those chapters to define him. The wisdom became visible later. The purpose became visible later. The same is often true in our own lives. We want immediate understanding, immediate answers, immediate certainty. But life rarely works that way. Faith invites us to trust before understanding arrives, and that is difficult, very difficult. Anyone can trust when everything makes sense. Anyone can trust when the road is clear. The challenge is trusting when you can barely see the next step. Today, when something difficult happens, I notice that I carry a different energy into it. Not because I've mastered life, not because I never struggle, not because I don't feel fear. I do. But I have collected enough evidence now. I've seen too many situations that looked like disasters become blessings. I've seen too many endings become beginnings. I've seen too many disappointments become redirections. I've seen too many painful chapters reveal hidden gifts years later. So now, when something doesn't go according to my plan, I don't immediately assume life is working against me. I become curious. I ask myself, what if I can't see the full picture yet? What if there is wisdom here that hasn't revealed itself? What if this chapter is doing something for me rather than simply happening to me? And that perspective changes everything, because gratitude begins where resistance ends. For years, I thought gratitude meant being thankful because everything was good. Now I think gratitude is trusting that good can still come, even when things aren't. Gratitude isn't pretending the struggle doesn't exist. Gratitude is refusing to let the struggle become the entire story. And maybe that's why gratitude appears throughout so many spiritual traditions. Because gratitude shifts your attention from what is missing to what remains, from what failed to what is possible, from what ended to what can begin. And where attention goes, life often follows. So if there is one thing I hope you take away from this video, it's this. Your future does not need a different past. It needs a different relationship with your past. You do not have to deny what happened. You do not have to pretend it didn't hurt. You do not have to celebrate every hardship. But you can stop allowing old chapters to write new ones. You can stop treating your history as your destiny. You can stop assuming that because something happened before, it must happen again. Because you are not the same person you were then. You know more. You see more. You understand more. And perhaps most importantly, Allah is not finished writing your story yet. The person you are becoming is not limited by the mistakes you've made, the heartbreak you've experienced, the opportunities you've missed, or the chapters you've outgrown. Your future is being built by the person you choose to be today, not the person you used to be yesterday. So stop building alternate timelines in your mind. Stop negotiating with a past that cannot be changed. Stop giving yesterday authority over today. The past has already taken enough. Do not allow it to take your future too. Because one day, just like I did, you may look back and realize that the greatest thing you ever released wasn't a relationship, wasn't a job, wasn't a circumstance. It was regret. And when regret loses its grip, something remarkable happens. The future finally has room to arrive. Thank you for being here. And if this resonated with you, I'd love to know, what is one chapter of your life that you've struggled to let go of? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.